Obvious calls to action. Welcome to Ben's Business Podcast, episode number 36. Today I'm going to be talking about the topic of call to actions and the importance of them. In a great book, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, it's about clarifying your message so customers will listen. It's about simplifying your message in your business. Today I'm going to focus call to actions in terms of not business meetings or sales meetings, but focusing on your website. This is a very basic part of what your website should be trying to do, and it's part of 5 basic steps that we need to imply into our website so that we get the most use out of it when visitors come to the website, so that they don't get confused and leave and click the back button. So I have touched on the call to action before. Here's a great quote out of Building a Story Brand, quoted Donald Miller. And he says, customers do not take action unless they are challenged to take action. And that's very simple. We have to tell people what we want them to do next. So it's so important to do that right hook, as Gary Vaynerchuk talks about, and tell people the next step. Because if you don't tell them, they don't have that guide figure to guide them to the next step. And that's a big part of the book, being the guide, and the customer position and the customers as the hero is what Donald Miller talks a lot about in a story brand. But today it's focusing on your website and the call to actions on it. So the first one is, our aim of a website obviously is to, if we're not a charity, we're a business, the aim of a website is to get the traffic to it and then convert those visitors, the traffic, people, convert that from visitors to buyers, to customers, paying customers. And that's the goal of a website in the end. So what is a call to action? A call to action is asking someone to take the action. There's 2 types of call to actions. One is a direct and the other is a transitional. So the direct call to action, talking in website terms, or let's talk about in life terms, what people would do to do a call to action. So in the book, Building a Story Brand again, he gave a good analogy of that, which is, will you marry me? And that's a great call to action. It's straight and it's to the point. And that's what your website should do as well. It's like buy now, and a button that they can click, and it's very obvious. And that's very important, which I'll talk about, that it's obvious. So buy now, it can be order, book or schedule a call. And then a transitional is almost back in our day-to-day life. It could be, can I take you on a date? And it's not as much of an ask as it might be. The purpose of taking someone on a date, obviously, eventually, is to ask them to marry you. But if you don't take them through that date process, they might say no if you ask them to marry you, and then you kind of lose your chance to go back to that first part, because it was a bit weird that you went straight for asking someone to marry you on the first date. So the same happens in business. You wouldn't marry someone on the first date, so the same happens in business. You wouldn't buy something unless you're building trust with if it's a larger investment for you or your business. So a direct and a transitional call to action, we want to have both of them on the website. A transitional call to action can be, in terms of that analogy, is download a PDF or join my webinar or come on my Facebook Live and ask me questions on Facebook Live for Ben's Business Podcast. So it can also be a podcast. Content marketing is a large part of you have to ask people to come and watch you and come and send them the video, and that's getting them onto your content and learning about you and your business, and that's taking them on dates in a way. Meetings can be like a free consultation, can be another transitional towards eventually making a sale, which is the aim of business and our website. So you don't want to be hiding your buy now button on your website, obviously. We need to make sure that's very clear, very obvious all over the website. Thanks for joining, Scott Frew, Dylan, and Neil Francis. Any questions, just send them in. I'm talking around call to actions and building a story brand. what happens when people visit your website is they almost scan from, well, if we're looking on this camera, if we're looking at a website, they scan from left, top left, onto your logo, and then they go across the website. So the eyeball goes from left to right, across your website, over to the top right hand corner. And that's usually where we look for a contact us button or a buy now button or some type of call to action button. We naturally go through that flow when that's what our eyes do, and it's scientifically proven with software and tools to show where people's attention goes on websites. So they go from that left place to the right, and then they kind of slide down and come back along to the right again. So if we make sure we place our call to action buttons across those parts of the website, I recommend the top right hand corner, a very clear call to action button, and in the middle where they kind of, when they're coming from the top right back down to the sort of bottom left of the screen of the website, they come to the middle of the website, and that's where you could also place a call to action button. And these call to action buttons can look the same, which is a good idea, because then it's that repetition, which you'll go into, and then again as they scroll down the website. And that's how our eyes kind of go about on websites and how our customers are looking at it. You want to make sure there's not too much noise on your website. I've talked about this before in previous videos, but we need to make sure we cut down the text. Although I do recommend text is needed for search engine optimization purposes, so that Google find those keywords within our content and find out who we are. But in terms of converting traffic into sales, we do need to cut down text. Bullet point things, make things bold, almost write it like a educational article that you find in the newspaper that's got good subheadings, a nice big headline and bullet points. And people don't just read websites, they scan them. And that's so important to remember, that if you think about how you read an article, you do look at these sort of subheadings, the bolded parts, scan through that, and then you decide whether you're going to read it, you save it to your bookmarks and never get around to reading it. So those bullet points or headlines, subheadlines are very important parts of our website and our text on our website. But we do want to minimize it, don't have too much noise, don't have their eyes going all over the place, because if they're doing that flow and we know that, then we need to place these buttons all over the place, and that's the things that they notice, because we want to make sure that these buttons are standing out. And a good example is, I've got a highlighter pen which I actually use on my script for these videos, and I highlight the sort of key points that I'm going to talk about in a podcast or a video, and that helps my eye draw attention to a script that I can maybe draw my eye at. But I don't like to take my eye off the camera lens on Instagram, and I prefer to just have some maybe bullet points for myself. And the same happens when people are going through websites, but it's having that sort of highlighted button, a nice bright button, a good contrast, so that people's eyes draw attention to those buttons. And if we make it blend in with the rest of the content on the site, it's the same color as all the other buttons, it doesn't look like that sort of straight call to action button. So that's why we need to make the colors different and stand out. I would recommend a bright color like your highlighter pen, yellow highlighter pen, or a bright orange one. So that's really important, and we should be repeating these buttons, as I've mentioned, at least 7 times across the website. That does sound like overkill, but it's so important. Thanks for joining, Tam. We shouldn't be hiding these buttons, but we should also, if we're displaying them somewhere, we want to make sure when they scroll down, there's a seven times rule in marketing and advertising, that in direct marketing, when people posted out letters, for example, a good example, Dan Kennedy talked about this, when the government or you're due someone money, or debt collector, and a letter will come through your door with a bright red overdue invoice on that letter, and that grabs your attention. It's that bright color, but they don't just send that once, they send it 7 times, and by that 7th time you really take notice of it. Maybe something more urgent like that, you take notice at the 3rd time, but in advertising, most people will do their best to avoid any type of sales to look at your mail, they'll put it in the bin. So getting things in front of people enough times, having that sort of repetition or theme, eventually gets people to take the information in or draw attention to then take it in. So we do need the person to hear or read something so many times. Another example is when I buy books. I have to hear a book is really good from a high authority, or else I'll need to hear my peers and people who read books on the same level as me will mention it enough times and tell me how good it is. And if I see like a picture of a book come up on Instagram, for example, enough times, I'll start to take notice of it. But if I don't, and this is great advice for authors out there, I'm a consumer of books, I buy a lot of books. And this is how to sell to me and a lot of other people I know, is make sure you get your cover of your book out there enough times and people eventually start to take notice of it. Then they'll listen to your market message and what your book's about. So that's really important on your website as well, coming back to that. The last point is, this is like a bonus tip because it's going slightly over my time, and it's the idea that we need to almost, without scaremongering, we need to almost tell them a reason what the potential failures are if they don't use your brand or service. Because without a loss of some type, people don't seem to need to take that action. There's a good quote out the book, Building a Story Brand Again. It says, Liam Neeson, the character, wouldn't have chased the bad guys to Europe unless his daughter had been kidnapped. The reason characters have to be challenged to take action is because everybody sitting in the dark theatre knows human beings do not make major life decisions unless something challenges them to do so. So we need to plant that seed as well, that if you don't take on this marketing campaign, you're not going to show up above your competition. Your competitors are going to take all this business right here, and you're going to show up on the third page of Google. If you don't mention and plant these things in, they take less notice of it because there's not some type of urge or what needs to take action now. So we need to plant that as well and have some kind of scarcity and show them the loss. We need to bring the loss to their attention, or else they won't go and find that. We need to bring that to their attention in our marketing messaging, on our websites and our elevator pitch and everything. So I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for watching. This was Ben's Business Podcast, episode number 36. I might be covering a series on website basics like this. Please leave a comment in the comments below. If you're watching it on replay, send all your questions in. If you're listening on podcast, again, send in questions through Facebook or Instagram. Thanks for watching on Facebook and Instagram.